Hello and welcome to my channel NBSoundHopperUK, and the subject of this video will be 10 more Oddball albums. Here we are then, another dive into the world of musical oddness where the unusual is commonplace and the unconventional thrives. This time I'll also feature a few of the heavyweights from these nether regions, some you may have heard of. Once again, the albums cover quite a time span, thereby demonstrating that performers who end up producing something strange, whether deliberately or accidentally, have always been a feature on the overall musical landscape. This isn't a ranking video, so the albums will be presented in chronological order. First up is Erotica, The Rhythms of Love, from 1962 by an unknown artist. According to the album's sleeve notes, this recording is not interpretive, not a sophisticated facsimile. You hear the uninhibited candor of erotic love, the sounds so aptly described by Ovid nearly 2,000 years ago. Eloquent words, but I'll cut to the chase. This is 28 and a half minutes of a couple banging away on a squeaky bed while some bloke plays the bongos in the background and occasionally yelps out encouragement. These sleeve notes also have what's described as technical data, which attempts to portray the recording as a triumph in sound engineering. All in all, it's a bizarre recording which is less noteworthy for erotic expression or technical achievement than it is for comedy. I don't actually have a physical copy of this, so hats off to Trunk Records for making it available as a 50p download, and it's still available. Second is Ceremony by Spooky Tooth and Pierre Henry from 1969. Spooky Tooth were a moderately successful rock band. Pierre Henry was a French composer and pioneer of musique concrète, a style that involves using recorded sounds to make a sonic collage, not dissimilar to what is now commonplace and available via sampling. In the 1960s, combining rock with musique concrète would have been an improbable mix anyway. When you throw in the concept of creating an album where the subject is the Catholic Mass, the mix of rock, musique concrète, and religion almost heads off into the realms of absurdity. For most of the album, it's like having two unsynchronized records playing simultaneously. On Confession, you've got heavy guitar chords against a backdrop of metallic hammering, the sound of the confessor's guilt being crucified, perhaps. Offering has Spooky Tooth rocking out with whirling electronic noises and a loop of someone inhaling sharply. Have Mercy, Jubilation, and Prayer also have this clash of the structured and the random. Final track Hosanna is the closest the artists really get to seemingly be on the same page. The single electromechanical note provided by Pierre Henry almost becomes a texture that the rock track sits over. As an album, it's a rather flawed project, but interesting nonetheless. Third is Crystal Telephone by Terry Durham, also from 1969. What a year. This was the only album released by Terry Durham. It contains various styles, including middle-of-the-road string-laden sounds, colliery brass band music, and contemporary rock of the late 1960s, all of which are vocalised with Yorkshire-accented beat poetry, an incongruous combination. The rockier tracks are stills from a late-night movie and Dreams of Tomorrow in every language, and these respectively are Terry Durham giving his thoughts on popular culture in general and the pitfalls of celebrity culture that led to the demise of people like Ernest Hemingway and Marilyn Monroe. There's a fair amount of sentimentality too, particularly on Fryston, Maine, where the subject of the poetry is the hard impact that a mine closure can have on a community, which foreshadows the experience of many towns in northern England 10 to 15 years later. A couple of tracks, White Room Dreaming and Moving Through My Life, are a little tacky, but on the whole, his sincerity is convincing enough to firmly place Crystal Telephone in that rare category of hidden gem. Fourth is When Sex Leers Its Inquisitive Head by Peter Wingard from 1970. Peter Wingard was a British actor who starred as Jason King in the short-lived spy series Department S, which started in 1969. After that, he starred in a similarly brief series simply titled Jason King. Playing a hedonistic writer with the type of oily charm that frequently led to romantic involvements, it was a fairly typical role adopted by a number of male lead actors in the late 1960s and early 1970s. What's that got to do with this album? Well, Wingard plays out that role on When Sex Leers Its Inquisitive Head, and the results definitely don't fall within the parameters of what would be described as appropriate nowadays, regardless of its clumsy, humorous intention of being a send-up. Most of the tracks cover the joy and pain of love and romance with deliberate cheesiness, mixing spoken word and singing. Come In, La Ronde de l'Amour, Jenny Kiss Me, and Once Again, Flight Number 10 are all examples of that. What I think most people would marvel at now, or even recall in horror over, would be the casual sexism and racial stereotyping, nowhere more so than on the track Rape. In many respects, this album gives an insight into what passed for acceptable humour in those days. Audacious, to say the least. Fifth is Trout Mask Replica by Captain Beefheart and his Magic Band, another from 1970. If you look around for lists of the strangest albums ever recorded, almost all of them will mention Trout Mask Replica, with good reason. It's an album that takes, amongst other things, bits of blues, garage rock, poetry, and experimental jazz and fuses it into a 28-track avant-garde extravaganza. Some tracks are polytonal, others polyrhythmic. On Hair Pie Bake 1 and on When Big Joan Sets Up, you get garagey blues along with John Coltrane or Ornette Coleman type saxophone gyrations. The poetic imagery gets way off kilter, such as on the track Well, with its line, "My head cracked like custard, ran red until it sealed." Neon Meat Dream of a Octofish goes even further out there still. The playing on the album is loose, so much so that on first listen you could be tempted to believe that nobody on the album could play at all, at least not in any recognised form. You might be tempted to never listen to it again, which would be a real shame because there's a lot to it. You just have to accept it for what it is and go with the flow. When you can do that, the more you listen to it, the more enjoyable it becomes. Sixth is the Sylvie and Babs Hi-Fi Companion by Nurse with Wound from 1985. Nurse with Wound started out in 1979 as a three-piece group, but gradually became the solo project of Stephen Stapleton, albeit with an assortment of collaborators over the years. If you're intrigued by the idea of music which is surreal in nature, then Nurse with Wound will fit the bill. Each album has its own character, making Nurse with Wound impossible to categorise or place within a specific genre. The Sylvie and Babs Hi-Fi Companion has two tracks entitled You Walrus Hurt the One You Love and Great Balls of Fur. You Walrus Hurt the One You Love finds Nurse with Wound in a playful mood, using sonic collage to satirise as its main subject easy listening music of the 1950s and 1960s. A large assortment of song samples, snippets from BBC radio comedy shows, bodily sounds, and other noises are pieced together in music concrete fashion. Great Balls of Fur is a more contemporary concrete piece, although not devoid of the 50s and 60s reference points. Overall, the finished product is an album I find very hard to tear myself away from once I've started playing it. That's in spite of the random nature of the sounds and the fact that it doesn't follow a distinct rhythmic pattern. It's all over the place, yet absorbing. 7. Wormwood, Curious Stories from the Bible by The Residents from 1998. Murder, incest, filicide, torture, deceit, mutilation and lust are all topics covered on this album, and it's not just the bad guys doing it either. When it comes to Oddball Albums, choosing The Residents to appear in this list was easy. The difficulty lay in which album to choose. I've gone for Wormwood, Curious Stories from the Bible, mostly because of its mischief. Stepping back and taking a more objective look at events depicted in the Bible is a fairly provocative act. The track Firefall, for instance, deals with Lot, who, after being advised to depart from the imminent destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, sees his wife turned to a pillar of salt, and then, later on, he gets seduced by his daughters. Bathsheba Babes recounts the tale of King David's lust for Bathsheba. In order to get his wicked way with her, he rationalizes that to preserve honor, it is necessary to arrange for the death of her husband, who is actually fighting in his army. With that kind of logic and loyalty, it's no wonder why the Ten Commandments are frequently rendered meaningless. This is just the tip of an iceberg on an album covering many equally deranged interpretations of morality. Musically, it doesn't fit into a recognized genre. Stylistically, though, it's unmistakably the Residents, and their mix of the cerebral and the weirdly funny has attracted a fan base that's kept them going for over 50 years now. 8. El Baile Alemán by Senor Coconut y su Conjunto from 2000. Uwe Schmidt has made music using a number of aliases. Let's see, Benthouse and Atom Trademark are possibly his most well-known among fans of electronic music. Senor Coconut is probably his most unusual in as much as it's Latin American music. On its own, that wouldn't really qualify this album to be included here. What makes it oddball, though, is the fact that it consists of Kraftwerk covers, all done in a Latin American style. So instead of synthesizers, you get instruments such as vibraphone, horns, congas, and loads of percussion, with vocals being handled by a pair named Argenis Brito and Jorge Gonzalez. Tracks like Autobahn, The Robots, Showroom Dummies, Tour de France, and Trans-Europe Express are given cha-cha or rumba-type makeovers. It's quirky to say the very least, but it's also fun, and above all, it highlights how catchy a lot of Kraftwerk's material is. 9. Ideas and Odias by Kid Carpet from 2005. Kid Carpet is the recording identity of a guy named Ed Patrick. Samples, Casio keyboards, and children's toy instruments are the main tools of his trade, and this album could be described as a novelty record. Add in wacky and witty lyrics, and you end up with a kind of jilted John for the 21st century. Sometimes music can be a little po-faced, but you couldn't get further removed from that here. The album starts with the track Special, which includes a sample from the 60s children's television program Trumpton. This is followed by Green and Pleasant Land, where the morbid humour of the lyric describes foxes and badgers lying asleep at the side of the dual carriageway. The dulcet tones of a Furby feature on the track Your Love. In The Traffic Warden and the Bouncer, Kid Carpet vents his fury at receiving a parking ticket, which is sung to the tune of ABC's Poison Arrow. As trashy albums go, this provides some great laughs across its 18 tracks. 10. Uada, The Subtle Art of Philorodomancy by Andrew Lyles from 2009. As I mentioned earlier, Nurse with Wound have had many collaborators, of which Andrew Lyles is one. The peculiar subject of this album is the occult practice of divination using rose leaves or petals, otherwise known as philorodomancy. The music on the album is fittingly unusual. Eerie and atmospheric, it contains drones, sound collage, and a mixture of spoken word and singing on some tracks. Much of it makes an ideal soundscape for some creepy gothic setting. In contrast, though, a track such as What You're Gonna Do with the Boys has a more contemporary sound. Andrew Lyles is prolific, and a lot of his material is self-released with limited pressings. Therefore, this album is a good entry point for anyone tempted to take a punt and buy one of his albums, as it's far more widely available at a reasonable price. And that's it, another bunch of stuff to confound, amaze, and amuse. In the description of this video, you'll find links to other YouTube videos of tracks from all of the albums I've spoken about, a low commitment alternative to buying them or listening to the albums in their entirety. Feedback in any of the forms shown above would be greatly appreciated, and a big thanks to the people who have either subscribed or commented in the last month. So if you've made it this far, thanks for watching.